Post-production was very difficult compared to the previous films for two unrelated reasons. The first was that the material shot in England had, in the eyes of the camera department, been poorly done. Shots had been rushed with the plan to fix it in post, except post was now fixing everything instead of focusing on fixing up the best shots to make them better. The problem was exacerbated by an issue with the blue layer on some of this footage. At first it was blamed on the French film stock that was used, but an investigation revealed that it wasn't that this film was poorly manufactured, but that someone who had thought themselves very clever took film stock that had been left over from Raiders of the Lost Ark to use, to save money, by using 3-year-old film on a big-budget movie. Lucas was uncharacteristically enraged over this, and while at least knowing the cause of the problem could help them undo the damage, it was a further distraction from trying to get the movie done. He also developed some strange compulsion around the number 13. Whenever he wanted to trim something, he would order it done by 13 frames. Every single time. And said that he wanted the final cut of the film to be 2 hours, 13 minutes, and 13 frames. His fixation finally bent in the face of good filmmaking, and instead he would lock the final film down at 2 hours, 16 minutes, and 9 seconds. The second issue was the problems at ILM. They had put in heavy work since Empire finished shooting. E.T. was a colossal hit. Star Trek II would be considered by many the standard against which the rest of that series was measured. Poltergeist was an entirely new kind of terror. And Raiders of the Lost Ark was one of the top-grossing films of all time. Only Dragon Slayer had failed, and that was in spite of the effects, as all of the reviews said. But the staff had been working very, very hard during those years, continuing to develop and invent techniques to make things better and better. By the time Return of the Jedi came, they were struggling with burnout, and the demands on this film were colossal. In one unfortunate incident, while trying to film a tie on fire, they had lit the ball portion on fire, but as it went along the wires, the ball flew off and landed on one of the forest sets for the Ewoks. Thinking quickly, one of the still photographers grabbed a fire extinguisher to put it out, only the rest of the ties were still moving, and one of the blades hit him in the face. His was not the only injury either. Phil Tippett, who was working with Dennis Muren on the Rancor after it was decided that a man in a suit like Godzilla was going to be unconvincing, he had a light fall on his hand right before a scene, and because there was no time to delay it, he had to do the scene anyway, which required him fitting his hand into the tight fit of the puppet. His hand swelled from the injury, and he had to spend the entire day walking around with a Rancor attached to his hand. Adding to the frustration at ILM was not having context for the shots that they needed to make. They understood that there might be some secrets, and that you couldn't trust a building full of people to not have one person slip up, but it added to the growing sense of being marginalized. Lucas had put off working with them to be present during filming, and now he wasn't on hand to provide them with what they needed to do their jobs, or provide them with scripts. They were some of the best people in the world at what they did, and Lucas more than anyone knew that, so why was this happening? Well, it had nothing to do with ILM at all. It had to do with Marcia Lucas. Marcia confessed to Dale Pollock that ultimately wealth and success only made their lives less happy than before. Getting here was a lot more fun than being here, she said. In addition to stepping away from her own career to help with Lucasfilm, Skywalker Ranch, and even Star Wars itself, she was unhappy with what she called the darkness that George would bring home at the end of the day. He wasn't fun anymore. He wasn't supportive anymore. Even when he was home, he was only so in body. Marcia finally asked that the two go to a marriage counselor, but Lucas would have none of it. He was raised with a small-town soldier-on attitude that didn't see room for such frivolity. Time went on, and as things got worse, she asked for a trial separation. But George wanted nothing to do with that either. And despite seeing his marriage crumbling, Lucas was convinced that he needed his attention focused on the film and the business, or that would all fall apart without him. Eventually, feeling emotionally abandoned by a husband who didn't seem to care what this was doing to her, Marcia found herself getting at the only place she could, in the arms of another man. She had met one Tom Rodriguez, and eventually they began having an affair. With the film nearly complete, George thought that they could soon do everything Marcia had been wanting to do, and he could repair the damage to his marriage. But he'd waited too long, taken it too for granted, and now Marcia wanted a divorce. They would wait until after the film was finished, but it did nothing to change the fact that Lucas was emotionally hollowed out. He still needed to finish the film. Everything was now depending upon its success, but that did little to quell the depression that consumed him. And he would never be in a position to truly forget what had happened, to constantly have that wound be reopened, because you see, you remember Skywalker Ranch, the place that Lucasfilm told him not to build, the expense that Marcia said they didn't need, the filmmaker's paradise with a library that would have that beautiful stained glass ceiling? Well, Marcia only met Tom Rodriguez because he came in to design that ceiling. Anytime George looked at the crowning achievement of his ranch, he was looking at the handiwork of the man who had taken his wife away.